I didn't hear the door open. That's how quiet it was. The soft creak of the floorboards in the hallway, the faint murmur of voices, the clinking of glasses. I was home early, which wasn't normal for me. But as I stood there, the house still and the lights dim, I noticed something felt wrong. Something about the air, like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to discover it. I had no intention of coming home early. No intention of walking in on anything. But in hindsight, I should have trusted my gut. You see, I didn't know what had been happening behind the scenes, the secret lives being led in plain sight. Not just from my wife, but from the people closest to me. People I trusted more than anyone else. The house was empty at first glance. No Claire, no kids, not even the dog. But the faint sound of hushed voices came from the study. It wasn't unusual for Claire to be on a call or working late, but it was the tone of the voices that made me pause. I walked slowly towards the study. My heart wasn't racing yet. Not yet, but it would be soon enough. There, in the dim light of the study, stood Claire. She was laughing, not her usual laugh, but the kind that didn't reach her eyes. Her back was to me, so I couldn't see her face, but I didn't need to. It wasn't her laugh that gave her away. It was the man standing in front of her. He wasn't someone I knew. Not directly, anyway. But something about the way they were standing, so comfortable, so familiar, set off a warning bell deep inside me. My throat tightened. I should have turned around and walked out, but I couldn't. Something held me there, watching from the doorway. I wasn't supposed to be there. Not supposed to know. But I was there. Are you sure he doesn't know? The man asked. His voice was low, almost like he was trying to whisper, but it was clear enough for me to hear every word. I don't think so, Claire replied, her voice faltering ever so slightly. He's too focused on his work. I've been careful, and you know how good I am at keeping secrets. I froze. In that instant, every inch of my body screamed to turn away, to pretend I never heard anything. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, rooted to the spot, as the world around me shattered quietly in the background. You always were good at it, the man said, his voice dropping lower as he stepped closer to her. But it's getting dangerous. He's bound to figure it out eventually. That was it. That one moment. The way she didn't answer immediately, the hesitation in her voice. It made everything click into place. Every late night. Every odd text message I had ignored. Every excuse to go out or stay late at work. All of it suddenly made sense. I didn't need to hear more. I turned around, my hands trembling, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to leave. I had to think. I had to breathe. But as I reached the front door, something stopped me. The sound of the dog barking from the backyard. The unmistakable sound of my daughter, Lily, calling out in the yard. And then, Noah's voice, soft but urgent, calling her inside. I didn't know why, but my first thought was to hide, to step out of the house and into the darkness, where no one would find me. I didn't want them to see me, to know I knew. I was paralyzed by the weight of the realization, the sinking feeling that I had been living a lie all along. The man, Claire, the kids, everything. It was all connected, like a sick puzzle that had been put together over time without me even knowing it. And then it hit me. Not just the affair. No, it was bigger than that. The betrayal ran deeper than just Claire and me. It was everyone. Everyone knew. And no one had said a word. I felt the walls closing in on me. I should have walked out. Should have slammed the door and never looked back. But I didn't. I stood there, trying to piece together my thoughts. And for the first time in my life, I felt utterly, painfully alone. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in place, trying to digest what I had just overheard. The room felt as though it was suffocating me. The air thick with lies and deceit. The low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen became deafening, as though the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to make the next move. My fingers were still clenched around the doorframe, like I was holding on to something that could shatter at any moment. I didn't know what to do. The anger inside me bubbled up, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, hollow emptiness. I thought I had everything under control. I thought I had a good marriage, a happy family. But now I felt like a fool. For a moment, I thought about leaving. Walking out the door, driving until I couldn't see the house anymore, and never coming back. But that wasn't me. I didn't run from problems. I faced them. And this was the biggest problem I had ever faced. I crept back through the hall, trying to make as little noise as possible. I didn't want Claire to know I had heard anything. Not yet. The sound of her voice still lingered in my mind. I've been careful. Careful. That's what she had said. But she hadn't been careful enough, had she? I couldn't just confront her yet. Not like this. I needed time. Time to think. Time to understand how everything had gone so wrong. I found myself pacing the kitchen, back and forth, the weight of the situation pressing down on my chest. The images of Claire with that man, standing too close, laughing together in that way that felt so intimate, too intimate for comfort, played over and over again in my mind. Gavin. That was his name. Her boss. It made sense now. All the late nights at work, the business trips, the sudden phone calls that always seemed to come at the worst times. What hurt the most wasn't just the affair, it was the betrayal. The realization that everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a lie. I had been living with a woman who was pretending to be something she wasn't. And my children? They knew. Noah and Lily. They knew, and they had done nothing to stop it. I had always tried to be a good father, a good husband. I did everything I could to provide for them, to give them the life they deserved. But what had I gotten in return? This. A broken family, built on secrets and lies. I stood there in the kitchen for what felt like hours, but it was probably only minutes. The house was eerily quiet. I needed to make a decision, but my mind was a mess. Then, I heard Claire's footsteps. She was coming down the hallway toward me, and I could tell by the sound of her heels that she was trying to act casual, as if nothing had happened. I quickly turned and faced the wall, pretending to be absorbed in thought. Max. Claire's voice was light, almost too light. I could hear the tension in her words, the anxiety she was trying to hide. You okay? You look pale. I didn't turn around, didn't even look at her. I didn't know what I would see in her eyes. I'm fine. I muttered, my voice a little rougher than I intended. Just tired, I guess. There was a pause, a long silence that seemed to stretch between us. I could feel her gaze on my back, but I didn't turn to face her. I couldn't. I think I'm going to bed, I said, my voice flat. You should get some rest too. I could hear her soft exhale. She knew something was wrong. But she didn't know that I knew. Not yet. The truth was, I didn't know how I was supposed to handle this. I couldn't just confront her and start yelling. That wouldn't solve anything. I needed to be smart about this. I had to make sure I had everything in place before I tore the whole thing down. But how? How could I bring myself to confront her, to expose everything, when I still wasn't sure who I was dealing with? The woman I had married? Or someone else entirely? I went to bed that night, the covers cold beside me, my mind racing with a million thoughts. But the hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the realization that nothing would ever be the same again. The next day, I watched Claire as she went about her usual routine, making breakfast, packing lunches, kissing the kids goodbye. It was like nothing had changed, like she hadn't just shattered my world the night before. But I couldn't forget. I couldn't unhear what I had overheard. And then, just as I was starting to gather the courage to speak, something unexpected happened. Noah came to me, his face pale and serious, his voice low. "Dad?" he said, glancing over his shoulder like he was making sure no one else was listening. "We need to talk." I knew right then that this was it. The moment everything was going to change. The moment Noah spoke, everything around me seemed to freeze. His voice wasn't loud, but the words hung in the air like a shadow that I couldn't escape. I stood there for a few seconds, unsure of whether I should respond, whether I should even acknowledge what he was about to say. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment everything would shift from something I could ignore to something I had to face head-on. Noah was standing in the doorway, his eyes darting back and forth like he wasn't sure how to begin. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, and his posture, normally so casual, was now stiff, as if he was carrying some heavy weight I couldn't see. "Dad, I don't know how to say this, but I can't keep pretending," Noah said, his voice so quiet I almost didn't hear him. I stepped toward him, but he took a step back, as though putting some space between us. That's when I saw it, the guilt in his eyes. It was too raw, too obvious to ignore. "Pretending?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The question felt too small for the enormity of the situation. Noah swallowed hard. "I don't want you to be hurt anymore, but I can't let you keep being in the dark about everything." I felt a sharp pang in my chest, and suddenly, the room felt too small, the walls pressing in on me. Was this really happening? Was my own son about to shatter everything I thought I knew about my family? "What do you mean?" I asked, the words coming out slower than I intended, my heart beating faster. Every part of me wanted to pull away, to close my ears, but I couldn't. This was the moment. I had to hear the truth, no matter how much it cut. He hesitated, his eyes searching mine for a moment before speaking again. I knew, Dad. I knew about Mom and Gavin. For months. Maybe longer. And I didn't say anything because I thought I was protecting you. My legs felt like they might give out beneath me, but somehow, I stayed standing. He knew. My son knew everything, and he had kept it from me. A flood of emotions surged through me. Anger, confusion, betrayal. But what took over more than anything was the crushing feeling of being utterly blindsided. The very person I thought I could trust the most, the one I had protected and raised, had been keeping secrets from me. And not just any secrets, secrets that could tear our family apart. Why? I managed to choke out. My throat felt like it was closing, and I couldn't tell if it was the disbelief or the anger that was making it harder to breathe. Why didn't you tell me? Noah's expression faltered, and for a moment, I saw the vulnerability in him I hadn't noticed before. Because I thought if I told you, you'd hate Mom, he said quietly. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to lose everything. My mind was reeling, trying to make sense of his words. He had kept silent for so long, hoping that the truth would somehow just disappear, that it wouldn't matter. He was trying to protect me, or so he thought. The weight of his silence pressed down on me like a vice, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been living in a world built on lies. Do you think I'd just let this go? I asked, the words coming out sharper than I intended. Do you think I wouldn't have wanted to know the truth? I don't know, he whispered. I guess I thought it was easier this way. For all of us. But now it's too much. I can't keep living with it, Dad. I need you to know. You deserve to know. The words he spoke felt like a punch to the gut, but I wasn't ready to fall apart. Not yet. I had to know more. I had to understand what had been happening in my own home, the home I thought I knew so well. Is it still happening? I asked, my voice cracking as I tried to keep the rage and hurt at bay. Is she still seeing him? Noah looked down, avoiding my gaze. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, and I knew then that he was too afraid to tell me the full truth. But I didn't need him to say it. I already knew. It was clear in the way he looked away, the way his hands trembled. I took a step back, feeling the weight of the revelation settle over me like a dark cloud. Everything I had built, everything I had trusted, felt like it was unraveling before my eyes. My family was no longer a safe place. It was a house of cards, ready to collapse under the weight of its own deception. Noah shifted uncomfortably. I'm sorry, Dad, he said, his voice small. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to make it worse. I nodded slowly, trying to process everything he had just told me. The pain of knowing my own son had been involved in keeping this secret felt almost unbearable. I had raised him to be honest, to tell the truth, no matter how difficult. And yet, here he was, apologizing for doing the very thing I had taught him not to do. I felt the floor shift beneath me, and I had to take a deep breath to steady myself. This wasn't just about Claire and Gavin anymore. This wasn't just about the affair. It was about my entire life, my entire family, and how none of it had been as real as I thought it was. You've done enough, I finally said, my voice heavy with emotion. You don't need to apologize. But I need time. I need to think. Noah nodded, his face full of regret. He turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the kitchen. But even as the door clicked shut behind him, I knew the silence wouldn't last long. I couldn't pretend anymore. The truth was out. And now, I had to decide what came next. The house was quieter than usual after Noah left. It felt like a vacuum had sucked the sound out of everything, leaving behind a deep, suffocating silence. I could still hear my heartbeat in my ears, thumping in time with the questions that swirled around in my head. How could this have happened? How could Claire, my wife, the woman I thought I knew inside and out, have betrayed me like this? And why had Noah, my own son, kept it from me for so long? I walked aimlessly through the house, each room feeling foreign. I went into the living room, staring at the empty space where we had once sat as a family, laughing and talking about our day. Now, it felt like a stage set for a play where none of the actors were being truthful. Every object, every piece of furniture, seemed like it was mocking me, a reminder of everything I had been blind to. I reached the study, the place where Claire and Gavin's affair had been uncovered. I couldn't shake the image of her standing there with him, her eyes soft, Her body language relaxed in a way that should have been reserved for me. It stung more than I could express, like a fresh wound that refused to heal. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was emotional. She had given pieces of herself to him that should have remained mine. The thought of it made me sick to my stomach. I picked up Claire's phone from the desk, my fingers trembling as I turned it over in my hands. I couldn't look at the screen, couldn't bear the thought of seeing any more evidence of her lies, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. My thumb hovered over the unlock button, and for a moment, I almost stopped myself. But then, something inside me broke. I had to know everything, every little detail. I had to understand what had happened, what had gone wrong, and why she had kept it from me for so long. I unlocked the phone, and the first thing that hit me was a message from Gavin, a text that was chilling in its simplicity. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Everything is set, just like last time." My stomach dropped. Last time? What did that even mean? What had been happening between them? How long had this been going on behind my back? The anger I had been holding back surged forward, but so did a profound sadness. I wasn't just angry at Claire. I wasn't just angry at Gavin. I was angry at myself for not seeing the signs, for not listening to the little voices in my head telling me something was wrong. I dropped the phone back onto the desk with a sharp exhale, my mind spinning. The longer I stared at it, the more the truth felt like it was suffocating me. Everything had been a lie. I wasn't just a victim of an affair. I was the victim of years of secrets. Claire had built an entire life, an entire world, right under my nose, and I had been too blind to see it. I needed space. I couldn't be here. I couldn't face Claire yet. Not like this. I needed to think, to breathe, to make sense of everything. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door, not bothering to tell anyone where I was going. I needed to be alone. I didn't know where I was driving, but I didn't care. The world outside was a blur, the familiar streets now feeling alien. I drove aimlessly, each mile taking me farther from the life I thought I knew. Eventually, I ended up at the park near the edge of town. The sun was setting, casting a muted orange glow over the lake. But even the beauty of the moment couldn't calm the storm inside me. I got out of the car and walked along the shore, trying to clear my mind. The sound of the water lapping against the rocks was soothing, but it didn't quiet the thoughts that kept rattling in my head. What now? What was I supposed to do with the truth? Claire had betrayed me. My son had betrayed me. The foundation of my entire life was cracked beyond repair, and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. I sat down on a bench, my hands clenched into fists at my sides, my eyes staring blankly at the water. It was then that I realized I had no answers. There was no quick fix, no easy solution to what I was going through. This was a mess, and the only way out of it was through it. But how? I thought about Claire, her face when she'd looked at me earlier, trying so hard to pretend that everything was fine. How could she be so calm when everything we had built together was falling apart? How could she keep lying to me like this? The deeper I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about her. It wasn't just about Gavin either. It was about me, my role in all of this. Had I been so consumed by my work, so distracted by the routine of life, that I had missed the cracks in our marriage? Could I have stopped it if I had been more present, more aware? I rubbed my face with both hands, feeling the weight of the situation pressed down on me. I didn't know what the right thing to do was anymore. Should I confront Claire? Should I leave? What would that do to our children? As much as I wanted to scream, to rage against the injustice of it all, something inside me told me that this wasn't the end. It felt like the beginning of something else, something that would require every ounce of strength I had left. And just as the last of the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky dark and cold, I realized one undeniable truth. Everything had changed. But the question remained, what was I going to do about it? The days that followed were like walking through a fog. Everything around me felt distant and distorted. I couldn't tell if it was the shock or the anger that was making me numb, but I was on autopilot. I showed up for work, spoke when I had to, went through the motions like a man trapped in his own life. I couldn't sleep, and when I did, my dreams were filled with images of Claire and Gavin, his hand on her back, their whispered conversations, her smile, a smile that was no longer meant for me. I had a sinking feeling that I wasn't just angry with them anymore. I was angry with myself. I thought about the conversation I had with Noah in the kitchen. His words kept echoing in my head. I thought I was protecting you. The thought gnawed at me. How had I let this happen? How had I become so blind to everything happening right under my nose? Noah, my own flesh and blood, had kept a secret from me for months. And it wasn't just a small secret, it was a life-altering betrayal. He had lied, thinking he was doing the right thing, but that didn't make it any less painful. And then there was Claire, the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with everything. I kept thinking back to her face when I walked in on her and Gavin that night. The way she had tried to hide the guilt, the way she pleaded for my forgiveness without fully acknowledging what she had done. She hadn't even seemed fully sorry. It was as if she had convinced herself that this was just something she had to do, something beyond her control. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized there was something else going on, something bigger than just an affair. The truth was, I didn't know who she was anymore. The woman I had married seemed to have disappeared, replaced by someone who could so easily betray me without a second thought. That thought alone was enough to make my stomach turn. But I knew I couldn't just let this sit. I couldn't let the days go by without confronting them, without finding out everything. I had questions, too many questions, and they weren't going to get answered by staying quiet. I had to make a move. I had to take control of my own life again. So, I did what I'd never thought I'd do. I called Gavin. It was a late afternoon, and I was sitting in my car outside the park, looking at the phone in my hand, my finger hovering over his name in the contacts list. I could feel my heart racing in my chest, my hands shaking slightly, but I wasn't going to back down now. I had to do this. There were no other options. No more playing nice. I pressed the call button, and for a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the phone ringing. My breath caught in my throat as I waited. What was I even going to say to him? What could I say to someone who had destroyed everything I held dear? And then, the line clicked, and I heard his voice. Hello. His voice was calm, almost too calm, and I could hear the faint sound of what might have been clinking glasses in the background. Gavin, I said, my voice cold. It felt strange, hearing myself speak to him like this, like I wasn't talking to a man I'd once respected. But there was nothing respectful left in me. We need to talk. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought maybe he was going to hang up. But then, he spoke again, his tone shifting, just slightly. Max, this isn't really the best time, you know? He said, almost dismissive. What's this about? I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I wasn't going to let him brush me off. You know exactly what this is about. You think you can just destroy my life and get away with it? I could feel the anger creeping into my words, but I held it back. I needed to be calm. I needed to have control of this conversation. Another pause, and then a sigh. I didn't mean for this to get so complicated, man, he said. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. His words sounded rehearsed, like he had said them before, to someone else. The man sounded like he was trying to justify his actions, like he thought he had a right to do what he did. You didn't mean for it to happen? I repeated, the disbelief obvious in my voice. You're a grown man, Gavin. You knew exactly what you were doing. I never meant to hurt you, he said, and I could hear the strain in his voice now, the edges of his calm facade beginning to crack. I never wanted to come between you and Claire. But that was the thing. It wasn't about me and Claire anymore. It was about everything he had taken from me, everything I had built with her. I couldn't let him get away with this. Not now. Not after everything that had been stolen from me. No, I said, my voice low. You didn't just come between us. You destroyed us. You destroyed my family. There was another long silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear him weighing his options. I knew he was going to try to weasel his way out of it, to offer some apology or justification for his actions. But I wasn't interested in any of that. I had heard enough lies. I need answers, I said, my voice sharp now. I need you to tell me the truth. Everything. From the beginning. Gavin didn't respond right away, and for a split second, I thought maybe he was going to hang up. But then, he spoke again, his tone now more measured, more serious. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he said quietly. But I don't think there's anything left to say. You know what happened. And I'm sorry, but I don't think it's going to change anything. I felt a coldness settle over me, as if the weight of what he was saying was finally hitting me. It was true. This wasn't going to change anything. Nothing could undo what had been done. Claire had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. Don't call me again, I said, cutting him off before he could speak. We're done. I ended the call and sat in my car, the phone still gripped tightly in my hand. It felt like the world had shifted beneath me. I had made my first move. But what came next? What was I supposed to do now? I didn't know the answer yet. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to let Claire or Gavin or anyone dictate how my life was going to unfold. I was going to take control, and I was going to make them all face the consequences. The storm was just beginning. The phone call with Gavin had left a bitter taste in my mouth, a lingering feeling that nothing had been resolved. It was almost too easy, too quick. He had apologized, but I didn't buy it. And the truth was, I didn't want his apology. What I wanted was something I couldn't get from him: closure, accountability, an acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. But he was a coward. He didn't have the courage to face the wreckage he'd made of my life. And that infuriated me even more. I had been avoiding Claire for days after the call. I couldn't bear to look at her, not after everything I knew. She had played me like a fool, and now I was the one left picking up the pieces. She texted me twice, once to apologize, the second time to ask if we could talk. I ignored both. I wasn't ready to face her. And honestly, I wasn't sure if I ever would be. But avoidance wasn't going to fix anything. The truth was out. It had been out for days. And yet, I had been sitting in this strange limbo, too afraid to face what was really happening. The pieces were scattered everywhere, and I had to put them back together somehow. The only question was, how? I spent most of the week in a haze. My work was suffering, but I didn't care. My mind was consumed with everything that had fallen apart. My marriage, my family, my trust, it was all shattered. And I kept wondering how I hadn't seen it. How had I been so blind to everything? I should have known when Claire started staying late at work, when she stopped laughing at my jokes, when she stopped looking at me the way she used to. But I didn't. I was too caught up in my own life, my own work, my own routine. I had become complacent, and now I was paying the price for it. One night, just as I was about to pour myself a drink, I got a text from Claire. "We need to talk. I can't keep living like this. Please, let's fix this." For a split second, I thought about ignoring it. I thought about pretending like everything was fine, like I hadn't heard a thing. But deep down, I knew that wouldn't work. There was no fixing this. Not without honesty, not without addressing the truth head on. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was coming. I texted her back, "Meet me at the park. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The park. Of all places. It seemed like the only place I could be alone with her, away from the walls of our home, away from the kids. I didn't know what I expected from the conversation, but I knew I wasn't going to let her talk her way out of this. I wasn't going to let her pretend like nothing had happened. Not this time. When I arrived, Claire was already sitting on one of the benches near the lake, her arms wrapped around herself as if she was trying to hold herself together. I noticed how pale she looked, how fragile. It struck me for a moment. This was the woman I had built a life with, the woman I had loved. And here she was, sitting across from me, a stranger who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I took a seat beside her, but I didn't look at her. I stared straight ahead, my mind racing with everything I needed to say. "I don't even know where to begin," I said, my voice low and tight. "I've been living in a nightmare, Claire. Everything I thought I knew, it's all gone. You lied to me. You lied to our family." Claire's eyes welled with tears, but she didn't speak. She just sat there, looking like she was waiting for me to give her permission to explain. But I wasn't going to give her that. Not yet. She had a lot to answer for, and I needed to hear it all. "I don't even know who you are anymore," I continued, the words coming out colder than I expected. "You've been seeing Gavin for months. Months, Claire. How long did you think you could hide this from me? How long did you think I wouldn't notice?" Her face twisted with guilt, but she still didn't speak. Instead, she reached for my hand, her fingers trembling. I pulled it away immediately, not wanting her touch, not wanting any of her comfort. She had lost the right to comfort me a long time ago. "I never meant to hurt you," Claire said, her voice breaking. "I never wanted any of this. It just happened. It just happened." I repeated, incredulous. "You didn't accidentally sleep with your boss, Claire. This wasn't some mistake. This was a choice. A choice you made over and over again. And now here we are." Her face crumpled in sorrow, but it only made me angrier. The guilt she was showing didn't make anything better. It didn't erase what she had done. It didn't bring back the trust one had lost. "I didn't know what else to do," Claire whispered. "I felt so alone, Max. You were always working, always distant. And Gavin was there. He made me feel wanted, like I mattered. I was stupid. I know I was." It was hard to hear her say those words, but at the same time, I couldn't help but feel betrayed all over again. She had chosen to sleep with Gavin. She had made that decision. No matter how many excuses she gave me, it didn't change what had happened. I can't do this, I said finally, standing up from the bench. My legs felt weak, like they might give out at any moment. I can't just forgive you. I can't pretend like this is something we can move past. The damage is done. You've hurt me in ways I can't even explain. Claire stood up too, her face pale and tear-streaked. Max, please. I love you. I'm sorry. I'll do anything to fix this. But I was already shaking my head. No, Claire. I don't think you understand. You've done more than just betray me. You've broken something between us that I don't think can ever be repaired. I took a step back, my chest tight with emotions I didn't know how to deal with. You've hurt our family, and I don't know if I can ever forgive you for that. Claire opened her mouth to speak again, but I held up my hand, stopping her. This isn't just about you and me anymore. This is about our children, about everything we've built. And I can't keep pretending like it's okay. I need time, Claire. Time to think about what I want. I turned and walked away from her, the pain in my chest almost too much to bear. The night air felt colder than before, and I could feel the weight of the world on my shoulders. Everything had changed, and I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know if it could be fixed at all. The night felt colder as I walked away from Claire. Every step I took felt heavier than the last, like the weight of the world had descended onto my shoulders, and the crushing pressure wouldn't let up. I could hear Claire's voice behind me, calling my name, but I didn't turn around. There was nothing left to say, no words that could undo what had already been done. The trust we'd built over the years was gone, shattered like glass on a hard floor. It didn't matter how many apologies she made or how many times she begged for forgiveness. I had heard it all before, and this time, I wasn't willing to fall for it again. I drove home in a haze, the silence in the car deafening. The streets seemed unfamiliar, even though I had driven them countless times before. My mind was spinning, a mix of anger, betrayal, and confusion. How had I let it get this far? How had I allowed myself to be so blind to everything around me? Claire, my wife, the woman I had loved for so long, had betrayed me in a way that cut deeper than anything I could have imagined. She had been so convincing, so good at hiding her secrets, that it took me months to even see the truth. And now, here I was, standing at the crossroads of my life, unsure of which way to go. When I walked through the door of our home, it felt different. The house was the same, yet it wasn't. The familiar sounds, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock on the wall, they all seemed distant. Nothing felt like it belonged to me anymore. Claire had taken that from me, too. I walked into the living room and sat down on the couch, my mind still racing. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't even focus on anything. But there was one thing I couldn't ignore, Noah, my son. He had been caught in this mess too, and as much as I resented Claire, as angry as I was with Gavin, I couldn't forget that Noah was part of this. He knew everything, and he had lied to me. I sat in silence, my thoughts swirling in a toxic mix of hurt and betrayal. I had raised Noah to be honest, to trust me, to come to me when something wasn't right. And yet, he had kept this from me. I had to know why. I needed to understand his side of the story, his reasoning for staying silent, for protecting Claire instead of telling me the truth. My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Noah. Dad, can we talk? I'm sorry. Please, let's figure this out. I stared at the message, my fingers gripping the phone tightly as a flood of emotions washed over me. I wasn't sure if I was ready for another conversation with him. I wasn't sure if I could handle more lies, more excuses. But I couldn't avoid him forever. I texted him back, the words feeling like a weight I had to lift off my chest. Come over. We need to talk. It wasn't long before he showed up, knocking softly on the door. I opened it and saw him standing there, his eyes swollen from crying. He had been trying to act strong, but I could see the guilt written all over his face. He had never looked so small, so vulnerable. Dad, I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking as he stepped inside. I didn't want you to find out like this. I didn't know what to say. I was just trying to protect you. I didn't know what to say at first. I had so many questions, so many emotions swirling inside me, but I couldn't find the right words. Instead, I just nodded, gesturing for him to sit down across from me. He hesitated, looking down at the floor like he was afraid to make eye contact. Why, Noah? I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say anything? He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. I didn't want to hurt you, Dad. I thought if I didn't say anything, maybe you'd be okay. Maybe you wouldn't have to know. I didn't want to see you broken. I didn't want to see you hurt. But I can't hide it anymore. It's eating me alive. I closed my eyes, trying to process his words. He had been protecting me, in his own way. But how could he have thought that keeping this secret would protect me? I couldn't understand it. But then, part of me understood. He was just a kid, trying to figure out what was right and wrong in a world where everything had been turned upside down. I wish you had come to me, I said, my voice cracking. I would have wanted to know. I would have rather heard it from you than from anyone else. Noah's face crumpled, and I could see the tears welling in his eyes. I was scared, Dad. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to lose you, too. For a moment, everything else faded away. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just heartbroken. Heartbroken for my son, heartbroken for Claire, heartbroken for the family I thought I had. I'm not going anywhere, I said quietly. But this is going to take time. I don't know how long, but I can't just forget what happened. He nodded, his voice barely audible. I know, Dad. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I need you to know that I'm sorry. We sat there in silence for a long while, neither of us knowing what to say next. The weight of the situation hung in the air like a fog, thick and suffocating. We were both broken in our own ways, and I didn't know how to fix it. But one thing was certain, the road ahead was going to be long and painful. As Noah left that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. My family, my life, my world. It was all slipping through my fingers, piece by piece. And I didn't know if I had the strength to put it back together. The days after that night with Noah were long. The house felt empty, even though it was filled with people. Claire was still there, trying to make amends, but there was an unspoken distance between us. There were no more late-night talks, no more shared laughter. The gap between us had grown too wide to ignore. Yet, something had shifted in me. The anger I had carried around for so long, the constant weight of betrayal, it was slowly starting to fade, replaced by something I hadn't expected, hope. It wasn't the hope that everything would go back to the way it was, because I knew that wasn't possible. Trust, once broken, could never be completely repaired. But it was the hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way forward. Maybe, in time, we could rebuild what we had lost, not as a perfect family, but as something real, something stronger, forged through the fire of our pain. Claire and I began to talk more. Slowly, carefully, we started facing the truth. I told her how deeply she had hurt me, how I felt like I had been living in a lie for so long. But I also told her that I wasn't willing to just walk away. I wasn't ready to give up on us, even though everything inside me screamed to do so. She listened. She apologized again and again, but it wasn't the apology I was looking for. I wasn't looking for her to apologize for the affair. I was looking for her to acknowledge the hurt, to understand the pain she had caused, and to prove she could change. It wasn't easy. There were times I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers that no one could provide. There were times I thought about walking away, about leaving it all behind and starting fresh. But every time I looked at Noah, I remembered why I couldn't. He was my son, and as broken as things were, I owed it to him, to Claire, to myself, to try. The hardest part was forgiving Noah, not because I didn't love him or understand his reasoning, but because I couldn't ignore the fact that he had kept the truth from me. It felt like another layer of betrayal. But, as the days passed, I realized that he had acted out of love, out of fear. He had been caught in the middle of something too big for him to handle. He was just trying to protect me in his own way, even though he hadn't known how. It took time, weeks, months, but we began to find a new rhythm. It wasn't the same as before, and it never would be. But it was real. We talked more openly, honestly, even when it was uncomfortable. We began to rebuild the trust, piece by piece. I forgave Noah, and in time, I forgave Claire, not because she deserved it, but because I needed to let go of the pain, to move forward. Holding on to the anger was only hurting me. One evening, a few months after that fateful night, Claire and I sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The air was warm, the kind of calm evening that felt like the world was holding its breath. It was the first time in a long time that we'd spent more than a few minutes together, just the two of us, without any tension hanging in the air. The silence between us was no longer uncomfortable. It felt peaceful, almost healing. I know I can never undo what I did, Claire said, her voice soft but steady. But I'll spend the rest of my life showing you that I can be the woman you deserve. I won't give up on us, Max. I can't. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with. Not the perfect woman, not the woman without flaws, but the woman who was willing to fight for our family, to fight for me. And in that moment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, we could make it through this. We'll never be the same, I said quietly. But that doesn't mean we can't be something new, something better, something real. Claire nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'm willing to try, Max. For you. For us. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. It wasn't easy. The road to healing wasn't quick, and it wasn't always smooth. There were days when it felt like we were back at square one, when the pain of the past threatened to overwhelm us. But there were more days when we looked at each other and saw something stronger than we'd had before, a bond built not just on love, but on honesty, forgiveness, and the willingness to face the hardest truths. As I watched the sunset that night, I realized that life had given me something I hadn't expected, a second chance. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a real one. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that, together, we could face anything.